Hey, my name is Caitlin Tate, and let's talk Conan. I'm super excited for today. You probably can't tell it in my voice because I have a very monotone voice, but I'm super excited because today is not only our first episode, it's also a celebration of Conan's first episode. And I've titled this A Complete Unknown, which you may think is a Bob Dylan reference because of the whole Timothy Chalamet movie out, but it's actually something he calls himself in the first episode, and I just thought it was a nice little callback. We're gonna keep this casual, we're gonna keep this academic, we're gonna keep this light and funny. Um, there are obviously a few things that we need to discuss, considering it is the 90s. So if you're aware of what that phrase means, congratulations, you are old. And if you don't know what that means, congratulations, you are blissfully ignorant or unaware. I find this episode to be greatly rewatchable, which is a talent in itself. Obviously, a lot of the remotes that we get to see on YouTube and such are also incredibly rewatchable, but for an episode to be rewatchable, that's a highlight. And luckily for Conan, his first episode is a complete highlight. An interesting start off with Conan is he spends the entire intro basically playing it cool, making the best of 100% stress. You better be as good as Letterman, right? Do you know how intense that is? Like, imagine that's the equivalent of someone coming up to me and be like, "You better be as good as Gorley." Like, that's just not happening, bro. I'm sorry. Like I'll do my best. I'm gonna do my best, but I'm not gonna be a professional. It's day one out here. It took me 2.5 episodes to figure out how to breathe properly while recording. Like, God bless Conan. I couldn't even imagine taking on a TV show right after someone as big as Letterman. And so throughout that intro, you get to see, everybody saying like good luck from varying angles of like good luck. I think you're gonna do a great job versus yeah, good fucking luck, buddy. And of course, Conan being Conan, essentially starts the show off with a massive suicide joke, which takes balls. And, it's no wonder why the youth stood by his side. I mean, it's the furthest form of self deprecation, and Conan has always laughed so hard at the idea of himself being hurt or killed. This actually makes me think about an old review they did of some scraps where the only joke Conan actually laughed at was the one where he blew his fucking head out. And if that doesn't explain Conan to you, then you're shit out of luck. You know, the idea of Conan being Kennedy'd is something he greatly enjoys. And I gotta give him props for that. Watching this, you see Conan. He's not necessarily a natural yet. I mean, we compare it to the Oscars, where he's totally in his element, totally in his zone, totally chill. I gotta stop totally saying totally. But you compare it to what this is, and guys, I've never seen someone talk with their hands as much or touch their face as often than Conan does in this first 5 minutes of the episode. You'd think he was Italian if it wasn't for, the height, the hair color, the skin complexion, the accent. I guess really the only thing they share is Catholicism, but even that's kind of. Anyways, another thing I picked up on immediately, and this is like one of the last gripes, I promise. This is like the last gripe. The rest of this, however long it's gonna be pretty positive. And it's God, it drives me insane. He is a massive tisker. A master tisk? There's something there. Master tisker. He sucks his teeth a lot, and I think Gorley mentioned this on the podcast. Conan O'Brien needs a friend at some point. Can't remember when, but I do know that he's a massive tisker, and I think that is the only negative thing I have to say is that he can't fucking sit still or close his mouth. Perfect. Now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's get into the cultural analysis. Let's get into what makes it funny, what makes it unfunny. Let's just I'm so excited. Let's get into it. So, if you've seen the episode recently, you're going to notice that I am bouncing around in terms of segment. I'm not going to go in order. I just don't think it'll flow well. So, we're going to start with the culmination of all three guests. The guests on this episode are John Goodman, Drew Barrymore, and Tony Randall. And I think each one of them did a really good job at pushing Conan into different directions. I'm going to start with John Goodman and end with Tony Randall, so we'll be going in order in that sense. John Goodman, I think, was a really good first guest. And it's kind of deeply ironic, too, because later in like 95, Andy and Conan would just rip into Roseanne constantly, which, as someone who was subject to Roseanne growing up, I get it. Like, I get it. But, no, I think John did a great job at bouncing between Conan and Andy. He didn't just sit on one side and focus on Conan. He really was trying to invite Andy into the conversation. And in this, Andy took on a persona just immediately and naturally of this like scared schoolboy. And I think Andy to me is like key to what makes these old Conan clips and the shows work. Without Andy standing by Conan's side for so long, I honestly think that this show might have flopped a little more than it was already being considered a flop. Also, this is a complete side note. I'm just saying this because Roseanne made me think of my childhood, which makes me think of the future because I'm an anxious mess. But Conan has predicted the future so many times. I don't know if anybody else has picked up on this. Like even on Conaf, like he's predicted quite a few things. If that's something you guys are interested in, I'll make a episode on that. But I have to wonder if that's just residual Simpson writer aura, or maybe he is God. I don't know. Anyways, back to the first episode. This is where I'm gonna have to mention one of those "it was the '90s" things. There is a little bit of casual racism on Goodman's side. Um, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not gonna go into these and be mad at what happens. What happens happened, and that's just it. We've seen Conan grow. We've seen the program grow. We've seen everybody involved grow. So I'm not gonna hold it against them. I'm just gonna put it out there that it exists. And I've actually managed to keep a steady track of watching and listening to older Conan things. Right now I'm in 95. And boy, there is a lot going on. But none of it is like evil. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, especially on this type of podcast where we are going to talk about, some bad things every now and again, just because of the times. I don't think anything said has ever been hateful. And that's a really important element to keep in mind when we discuss. It's never been hateful. It's never been evil. It's just been of the time. And there are plenty of TV shows. I immediately call back to Doctor Who, Talons of Wen-Chiang. That was bad. Like that was bad. There's no excusing that one, but it happened, and we have to acknowledge it and address it. What's amazing with Late Night with Conan specifically, I suppose, is that it's never really been bad. It's just kind of awkward moments of, oh, shouldn't have said that. I recall, I was watching an episode. I think this one took place in '94, but someone had said a word that we don't use anymore, and that kind of made me think, if he had said a different word, it wouldn't have mattered, right? He didn't say the word as to be evil or hateful. He just said the word because that was the word they used. And I think a lot of this 90s era stuff that we are going to dig up is going to fall into that category. So just a blanket statement. If I ever address something, it's never out of malice or ill intent. It's just because it happened, and we should talk about it. We shouldn't get mad at it, but we should acknowledge it. Unless something really, really, really bad happens. There was a moment where I heard something. It was a visual gag, but I do think there might have been a touch of blackface. Oh, also the Michael Jackson jokes. Those just didn't age too well. Anyways, back to the show. So Goodman did a really good job at just bouncing between them, kind of setting a strong foundation of what a talk show should be. But then we get into Barrymore, who kind of just leans towards Conan, doesn't really acknowledge Andy. That's okay, that's fine, we'll get to that. But she offers Conan a different direction, which is that of like a creepy flirt, which I don't think it was supposed to be a creepy flirt. I'm just going to call it that because eventually that's what it becomes in the modern Conan era. Is just doesn't mean it's all lighthearted. There's not too much to say about Drew Barrymore in this interview other than that's the direction she pushes him in. And I suppose this bleeds into another sort of, it was the 90s. I feel like this is more so on the producers, where Barrymore is brought in to be kind of like eye candy, to be just like a woman of the show. The first DEI. Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news. Conan, Late Night with Conan, first case of DEI. Holy fuck. Has Conan gone woke? Stay tuned for more later. But no, just a quick little insert on that. potentially being on the fence. But again, no ill will. And then the final guest was Tony Randall, who just, God, he kills Conan. He just pulls out a gun and just starts shooting him in the fucking face over and over and over and over again. And it's great. Conan handles it so well, so professionally. And I think that Tony Randall kicking his ass was so needed. Not because he needs to be humbled, but it's nice to see somebody get taken down every once in a while. David and Goliath esque, and the way they did it was really funny. It kind of reminded me of like how Marty Short would attack Conan, that style of humor, and it's just casual banter. It's not evil. So I think these three guests really gave Conan and the audience three different interviews that kind of perfectly captured different corners. I think if they had one more guest who was just off the walls fucking crazy, that would have been it. It would have been perfect and we would have understood everything Conan had to offer immediately. However, I do like not knowing everything about Conan immediately and getting to learn about him, which brings me into my next topic, which is how you really get to see the roots of the show build. And what I mean by that is, in this first episode alone, we're exposed to an audience member plant, actual items, Andy and Conan's dynamic, leg wrestling in the middle of an interview, fake interviews, awkward pseudo flirt, like I mentioned with Barrymore, and even singing in the weird falsetto voice he does. Like, all of those core things that we know Conan for now happen in the first episode, which that's just like, you couldn't ask for a better first exposure. Just, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. And the youth certainly took it, and NBC certainly tried to leave it. Having brought up actual items, I do want to backtrack it a little bit and discuss the evolution of that concept. So in this episode, it's called Actual Small Town Items, which is an innovative, groundbreaking idea, which of course gets shortened into actual items, which just makes way more sense, less words. Everyone in comedy knows humor is in the words. If you can keep it tight, keep it short, you can hit better. So whoever decided to add in small town, I hope they were fired immediately. But no, I think that's a great example of a root shining throughout the show. And through that, I want to touch on Andy. In this episode, Andy just kind of spawns just on the couch, which I think is really funny, but I don't think it's supposed to be a joke. He just appears. And I adore Andy. To me, I see him as the perfect comedic wingman. He's got that beautiful Midwest humor of pseudo-sarcasm and complete apathy. Even joy sounds fake. I absolutely love it. He's so quick-witted, and I don't know if you guys listen to Andy's newer stuff, the call-in show or 3 Questions. God, I love Andy. He's so funny, so funny. He's just completely Illinois, as am I, and maybe I'm biased, but I adore it. I adore him so well, and I think he does so well on this show. There are a lot of episodes where it would appear Andy doesn't really say much, and I miss him. When he's not saying too much, I miss him. Another thing I really adore, which maybe I shouldn't, is the set. Even though it's all brown and sad and academic, there's something about it that just says warmth. And maybe it's not supposed to convey that, but to me, it just reminds me of school and like office hours. But I'm a loser, and I loved my time at university, so maybe that's just me. But it's also something about the 90s is just color. They weren't afraid of color. Some things can be brown. It's okay. Not everything needs to be pristine, clean, white, and blue. Which obviously Conan later shifts towards a blue tone, but we'll talk about that when we get there. It's really charming, None of it looks good. I'm going to put that just up front. None of it looks good, but it all works, and that's what makes it look great. If you put that set up nowadays, it would not pass. But it's got a charm of the 90s, which I really love. So now that we've kind of discussed the people and the, vibe of the show, I think it's time to actually dive into the comedy. So very much in this episode, we are exposed to what I call, and I say this with so much affection, stupid humor. Humor that it's not funny. It's not. But it is, because why would somebody put time and effort into thinking of that? And maybe that's a shift culturally. Maybe back in the 90s, this was actually just like humor, and it wasn't, ironic. I wouldn't know. So going back to, and I'm going to use its government name, actual small town items. An example of this this stupid humor is Louise hit by a bus. Doctor help Louise, and her husband John hopes she's okay. Like none of this is funny. It's just, objectively, it's just not, you know. But in the context of just being idiots, it's absolutely hilarious. The way that the story works, you know, Louise was hit by a bus. Like, it's just it's not funny, but it works so well. I love stupid humor, it's my favorite type. And also, side note, if you go ahead and pause and read, because this video, if you aren't aware, this episode is actually freely available on YouTube, under the Conan O'Brien channel. So feel free to check it out and let me know what you guys think about it as well. But if you pause to read it, the newspaper goes on to say that anybody named Ian Mitchell is subject to arrest. And I love that. I love when TV shows, movies, you know, anything visual just adds in some bullshit inside joke between them and their own writers. It's just one of my favorite things ever, so I'm so happy to see that. I wouldn't say anything has aged terribly, which I think is, thank God, especially for a first episode. Lord knows that this could have been way worse, way more offensive. But I think everybody who knows Conan doesn't really attack. He just kind of plays the ear, apart from all the Michael Jackson stuff. I just think it's really fascinating to see how far he's come, because a lot of the humor that we see, it's it's so Conan. Like you just see Conan. It's not as if he's pretending to be some, you know, I'm better than you, I'm on TV, therefore I'm super funny. Like no, he's just an idiot. He's always been an idiot, and it's just comforting to see that. His first episode truly is a comfort episode, which, again, incredibly rare for that to occur and for it to happen so naturally and so warmly. It's to be recommended and it's to be appreciated and acknowledged. Obviously, a lot of you guys are Conan fans. That's why you're tuning in. You want to understand how some stranger on the internet feels about Conan, and you want to know culturally what's changed and has humor changed. And I think one thing that we already have an answer to for Conan, at least, is that the humor has never changed. It just hasn't. It's always been silly. It's just what's changed is what he's more comfortable joking about. And a lot of the 90s stuff is edgy. It's just plain and simple. It's edgy. It's good. It's great even, but good God. I don't think Conan would say a lot of the things that he's once said. And again, that's not a bash or a diss. It's just not the times. And I don't think it's what he wants his comedy to be. But it's my job to go in and dissect all of that, so stay tuned. I wish there was something, you know, negatively groundbreaking about this episode to kind of give it more juice, more gossip, more bite. But there's just not. It's really just a well-rounded episode. Conan makes the joke that everything's written down, which, you know, it's not, but it might as well have been. I imagine this was incredibly rehearsed for his own sake and for the sake of the program. And we know that over time, Conan just kind of fell into his own belief and his own structure, and that's amazing. But it's just beautiful as an outsider looking in to watch the chaos behind the scenes and compare it to the success on the screen. I think a lot of people who look up to Conan don't understand that, yeah, we loved what we saw. But that's because we were the target audience. You know, we were idiots. We were people who had nothing better to do than to watch this fool. Meanwhile, NBC is trying to target this to Letterman fans. A talk show's a talk show, but they're not the same, if you understand what I'm saying. And so, for that just dramatic shift, I can't imagine the stress that Conan was under. And for this first episode to be so well put together, it's because it's not clunky. A lot of these TV shows nowadays, you imagine first episodes are allowed to be a little clunky. Everyone's figuring stuff out. Maybe it's just my theater background where it's like day one has to be perfect, but it never is. Something's always gone wrong on day one, and that's why we practice, and that's why we have so many rehearsals. But I don't see what could have been wrong. And maybe that's me being naive. Maybe somebody out there has seen the episode themselves and is like, no, you're completely wrong. At 2213 this happens and Conan's a fuck up, but I just don't see it. I also think in terms of rooting, not to sort of talk in circles anymore, but I think in terms of rooting, we really see he's testing the waters. And he tests the waters for a few years, actually. I would wager the first 3 years is him figuring it out, which is totally fine. Again, I have no complaints over the first 3 years that I've heard so far. And I highly doubt you'll find many a complaint from me that is related directly to Conan and not like a guest or something. Because sometimes you can't control a guest. And it happens. We'll get to one of those episodes. I have it planned. Good lord. Overall, I guess the question is, why? Like, why is this episode worth it? Why is it so important? Caitlin, you've already said that you really liked it. You've already said it's a comfort episode. You've seen it before. Why does it matter that this episode exists? You're just praising it. You're just praising Conan. You're just shitting on NBC's lack of faith. Why does it matter about this episode? And the answer is this episode matters because it's the start. This episode, no matter what, was the start of something. And it's really important to look at where we begin to see where we end. Now, I've already said that Conan started in a very similar situation as to when he ended. But there's so much between there. I like to think about it like this. When you were in middle school, you loved something. You loved it so much that you wish you had a job to pay for stuff related to it. You wish you could go to conventions. You wished you could stay up and watch it. You loved something. And then you went to high school. And you were kind of hesitant to love so proudly. We kept it in our back pocket. And we were ashamed of it. We kept it to ourselves. Maybe told some friends about it. But for the most part, we kept it inside. And then you hit a certain age. And this is where it varies. And you just love it again. Unabashedly. You're just like, you know what? Fuck it. This makes me happy. I love doing this. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to show this thing that I love it. And I think that's the trip that we're going to go on together, diagnosing Conan. I think there were periods of time where Conan felt like he had to put himself away. But he started, much like we all did, absolutely in love with something. And he managed to finish with his love on full display, which is a feat in itself. Did I go too deep? Did I make no sense? I had fun, and I hope you did too. Thank you so much for talking, Conan. Peace out.